All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the year of Tafshin Pei, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Family of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shirim and Drashos this year as a zechus for besuros, tovos for Am Yisroel. We thank them for their incredible generosity. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Haba Alinu Latova, the Kelman Family, in memory of Amit Ben David Levy, brother of Itay Levy, who was killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. May Baruch Hashem provide his neshama with an aliyah, his family ein nechama. And Baruch Hashem, I spoke about this a lot last night, so I'm not going to speak about it more this morning, but the overwhelming news out of Eretz Yisrael, with the Meretz Hashem, the beginning of the return of some of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael already on Sunday, Meretz Hashem, b'sha'ah tova u'mitzlachos. And as we spoke about last night by Chasidus, whatever the feelings about the deal, as it is a complicated discussion, but the idea that some of our brothers and sisters, that hopefully, again, the Bibas family, amongst others, will, Meretz Hashem, be coming home on Sundays, overwhelming feeling of hodah, of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Meretz Hashem and the zechus of our Talmud Torah. The rest of our brothers and sisters should come home. Our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yadeim, and Klal Yisrael and Meretz Hashem should be zochaton besuros, tovos, brachos, yeshuas, and nechamas. Well, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Lamed Aleph 31. We have a lot to do today, and we are starting on Lamed Amud Beis 30b. I'm almost like a little bit embarrassed. It's 4 lines down from the top on 30b, but it's okay. It'll go quickly. It says in Rabbi Shimon Eliyakim, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Misbechai. So Rabbi Shimon ben Eliyakim was trying very hard to convey smicha upon Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. Below ka mistayim milsa, but it wasn't working out. It's a good lesson. Sometimes in life you try very hard to make something work, and it doesn't work out. Yom Echad Hava Yosef Kamed Rabbi Yochanan. So one day he was sitting before Rabbi Yochanan. So again, remember, this was Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim was trying to go ahead and convey smicha, right? So Lamaisa, he was trying every day. It didn't work out. One day he's sitting before Rabbi Yochanan. So what happens? Rabbi Yochanan asks, does anyone know, does the halacha follow Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha or not? Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim didn't yada. Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim says, yes, there is a guy who knows. His name is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Amarle, Lema Ezo, tell him to come here, tell him to tell me. Amarle, Lismechei Mar Bereisha. So interestingly enough, Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim says to Rabbi Yochanan, give this guy smicha first, give this guy Rabbi Yossi, give this guy Rabbi Yossi smicha, and once you give him smicha, I'm sure I'll be happy to tell you everything. So Samchai gave him smicha. Amarle B'ni, said my son. So now again, remember, this is Rabbi Yochanan speaking to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. And Marli, Ketzad Shamata, what did you hear? What's the halacha? So I'm like, Kach Shamati, supposed to say, remember again, just to orient ourselves for a moment, our three-way machlokes in yesterday's daf about the nature of eidos, right? Remember again, we had the Tanakama. Tanakama said that halacha l'maisa eidim, witnesses have to see the same event together. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, they do not have to see it together, but they have to give over the testimony together in Beis Din. And then Rabbi Nassan, they could even come on different days to be able to give their eidos, and we could combine them. So now Rabbi Yochanan is trying to figure out who does the halacha follow. So now what happens? Rabbi Yossi Chanina says over. He says, Kach Shamati, Shemor Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Rabbi Nassan. Shemot that Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha is modeh to Rabbi Nassan. He is effectively a guzit Rabbi Nassan, namely that Allah Chalamaysa witnesses could even come and give over testimony separately in Beis Din itself. Supposed to say second one line. So to which Rabbi Yochanan says this, I needed this guy to tell me this. Of course, Rabbi Shimon ben Karcha holds that way. Rabbi Shimon ben Karcha holds that witnesses don't even need to see the event together. The halachas kama v'kama, he holds that they don't have to convey their testimony together. But he says, so apparently Rabbi Yochanan felt that the smicha was not worth it. So Amalei hoil va'alisa lo tered. But once I gave you smicha, I'm not going to take you down from your position. Am Rabbi Zera shmamina gavra rabba kevan desamech samech. What do you see from here? Once you convey smicha, you don't take it back. Okay, interesting story. That's the name of Rab, that the halacha follows Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. That's the halacha. Now, I guess, remember again, I'm both saying, I want to point out over here, the way Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha was stated on Amud Aleph, and the way that he was understood by Rabbi Yochanan are different. Right? Rabbi Yochanan understood that according to Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, essentially, the same way that witnesses don't have to witness the event together, they also don't have to convey it together. That's not the way Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha is stated or is quoted on Amud Aleph. On Amud Aleph, he's quoted as, they don't have to witness the event together, right? They can see the event separately. When they come to Beis Din, they must testify together in order to form a cohesive testimonial unit. So now the Gemara is saying, Ta'alacha follows Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, Bein bekarkos, bein metaltlin, whether we're talking about, again, edus over karka or edus over metaltlin. Ula amar lach Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, bekarkos, aval bemetaltlin. So we'll say, so listen to aval bemetaltlin. So on the other hand, Ula says, Ta'alacha does Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha, but where? Only by karka, not by metaltlin. Not by metaltlin, says the Gemara. Now we'll say, if you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says, what's the difference between karka and metaltlin? There's a big difference. Rashi says, Karka, shemuta ha-karka befanenu, ushneim idan aleh. Karka is concrete. It's right there in front of us. So therefore, again, I could see how I could accept Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's position that even if the witnesses don't go ahead and see each other, halacha l'maaseh, they could still go ahead and combine to form a testimonial unit. By metaltalin, it's not here. It's not together. And because it's not together, again, at least Ula wants to make this distinction. Okay, I'm with Abaye, halacha mechlal depliki. Now, interestingly enough, whenever you have to go ahead and say the halacha follows a certain opinion, what does that indicate? That usually indicates that halacha l'maisa, there's someone else who argues. Modim chacham Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha be'edus karka. Yet it says the chachamim agree to Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha when it comes to edus on karka. The Tani Rav Idi bar Avin ben Izak in the Beikarno, and Rav Idi bar Avin also taught this when they taught Nezikin in the Yeshiva of Beikarno. Modin chacham Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha be'edus bechar, or be'edus karka, or be'edus chazaka, v'chish shebebein v'shebebas. And ultimately, again, the chachamim agreed to Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha in all of these aforementioned halachic discussions. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Gavra karamas, marsa pligi, marsa v'lo pligi. Okay, it will say. This is fascinating. It's not a contradiction when people have different opinions, right? Not a contradiction when people have different opinions, right? That halacha l'maaseh again. So some say that the Chacham agree with Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. Some say they don't, or they argue on which cases there is agreement and which cases there's disagreement. That's not a stira. That's not a contradiction. So the Gemara says, "My v'chin shebebein shebelas." What's the case, by the way? What's the case of the son and the daughter? Even echad omer echad begabah ve'echad omes achas akprisa. Hai chatzi davar, hai chatzi davar, v'chatzi edosu. Suppose say, I'm sorry. Hai chatzi davar, v'chatzi edosu. Suppose say the case, by the way, literally it says one on the back and one on the stomach. So this discussion actually has to do. We know that a child is considered to be a gadol when they have 2 pubic hairs. So there's a discussion in terms of the placement, right, of where those need to be in order to be bona fide signs of physical maturation. So, okay, that's what it means when it says one. It doesn't literally mean on the back and on the stomach. They're both obviously on the front of the body. The shayla is on the placement. Okay, so the Gemara says, Ella echad omer shtayim begabo, but echad omer shtayim bekresa. Rather, we'll say, what do you have? You have one says that 2 hairs were in one place, and one says 2 hairs were in a different place. Amar Yosef, Ana aminu mishnei de'ula halacha b'shul ben karcha, bein bekarkos, bein metaltalin. I hold that halacha follows b'shul ben karcha, both by karka and by metaltalin. But Rabbanan the Asum Mechuza, but Rabbanan come from Mechuza, Amr Rabbi Zera, Mishmei Derav, Bekarkos, in Avalob Metaltlin. They say they know that Allah calls Mishmei and Karka where? By Karka, but not by Metaltlin. Rav L'tamei. So Rav goes according to his reasoning. Why? The Amar Rav, Hoda Achar Hoda, or Hoda Achar Halva Mistarfi. So we'll say this is fascinating. Take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi's on the first wide line. Hoda Achar Halva. Or Oda, actually go back up to the second to last short line. Ho Oda achar Oda, ze omer befanei chodalo almane be'echad b'Shabbos, ve'ze omer befanei chodalo alav b'sheni b'Shabbos. So we're going to get more into this in today's daf, Hashem. well, on actual today's daf, in just a little bit. But let's say I have the following situation, right? Witness number one shows up and he says that I saw Reuven admit to Shimon that he owes him $1,000 on Sunday. I saw this event on Sunday. Shimon shows up and he testifies. Or witness number two shows up and he testifies. I saw Reuven admit that he owes Shimon $1,000 on Monday. So they're both testifying that Reuven owes Shimon money. Interestingly enough, they're testifying that it occurred on different days. Now again, that's really going to get into next Mishnah. We'll just go next Sugya. So we'll see in just a little bit. So but Rav holds that Hoda Achar Hoda or Hoda Achar Hava are mitzdarfi. Rav says these two witnesses combined. So the Gemara says Hava Achar Hava or Hava Achar Hoda lo mitzdarfi. Interestingly enough, so this is a case of admission after admission or admission after a loan. So we're confident in allowing these two witnesses to combine. I will say, we don't pass in this way. If witnesses cannot get their story right about which day the event occurs, they're out. But Rav holds it's okay because the pashtos, they're testifying about the same day. Contrast that with halva achar halva or halva achar halva. For example, let's say witness number one says, I saw Reuven borrow $1,000 from Shimon on Sunday. And witness number two says, I saw Reuven borrow $1,000 from Shimon on Monday. Those two witnesses don't combine. Why not? Because it's possible that's what? Two different loans. Admissions, in other words, if witness number one says, I saw the admission on Sunday, witness number two says, I saw the admission on Monday, it's most probable they're talking about the same thing. But loans can be two different loans. Why is it that, again, if witness number one testifies about a loan occurring on Sunday, and witness number two testifies about it occurring on Monday, that they cannot combine? The Gemara says, because it's possible that the $1,000 that witness number one is testifying about is not the same $1,000 of witness number two. Maybe it's two different loans. I hoda achar hoda nami. Amanat de kamo de kame hai lo modi kame hai. But you can say the same thing in the case of an admission. Maybe when Reuven admits that he owes him $1,000 on Sunday, that's a different $1,000 than he admits that he owes him on Monday. The Amrle lahai basra bahai mana de odilai kamo odie nami kame ploni. So listen to this. No, what's the case? The case is where Reuven says to the witness, second witness, the same $1,000 that I admitted to in front of the first guy, the first witness, that's the same $1,000 that I'm admitting to in front of you. To which the Gemara says, that's fine. Akati basri yada, kama lo yada. That's fine. So now the second witness knows, but the first one doesn't. To which the Gemara says, the hadr azil amar lekama haimana de odile kama odine nami kami ploni. Where again, this is where the litigant goes back and admits it again in front of the first witness as well. He comes back to the first witness and says to the first witness, halacha l'maisa, the same mana, right? The same money, the same $1,000 that I just admitted to the second guy, I'm also coming back and admitting to you. Amalei, tanuach daitko shehes nachta es daiti. Thank you for putting my mind at ease. Your mind should be put at ease because you put my mind at ease. Okay, Amalei manichus. How did I put your mind at ease? The Rabbi Sheshes shada beinarga lav hainu hoda achar halva. Also, Gemara says because again, what ended up is actually the expressions over here are very interesting because halacha l'maisa he says the Rava or some say it was Rav Sheshes literally took an axe and swung it. Now the expression of taking an axe and swinging it in Talmudic lingo means deconstructing an argument. Deconstructing an argument. Gemara says lav hainu hoda achar halva. Isn't that the same case of Hoda Achar Hava? So then he answered the question and then asked another question. Amalei Hainu Dishmiya Li Aleichu Tramisa Digle Vizakfisuluhu. This is what I've heard about you. that you are a guy who goes ahead and chops down palm trees and then replants them. So I'll say, which is an expression, that's a good expression. It's a person, so the expression, I feel like Rashi says, it's 4 lines up on the bottom, Teramisu dikli v'zakifule, sha'atem mishunim kotitzin dekalim, v'chozrin v'notin osam. So what do? You chop down palm trees, you replant them. Kolomar, bonim v'sosrim, shebrashim mikusha v'chazartem ustartem. So I'll say that expression of chopping down and replanting represents people who ask questions and then create problems afterwards. Right, so that's good expression to have. Okay, Nardai say, Bein bahoda achar hoda, bein hoda achar hava, bein halva achar hava, bein halva achar hoda mitzdarfos. So the Nardaim say, the truth is, we hold in all of these cases, the witnesses go ahead and combine. Like who? Kiman, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Ultimately, again, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Edus hamachishos zuezu. So I say, what about witnesses who contradict each other? Bebedikos. When it comes to bedikos. And also, we actually had this already a little bit earlier. If you remember, again, when examining the witnesses, there are 2 different types of examinations. There's what's called bedikos and chakiros. Take a look 4 lines up from the bottom. In Rashi. Bebedikos, she'eno misheva chakiros be'eze yom be'eze shah shazama teluya b'ayim. So here's the way to remember it. Chakiros are what we'll call these specific details through which Eidim could be made zomamin. Now remember again, how do you make witnesses into Eidim zomin? How do you make it? How do you make them zomin? Remember, Eidim zomin are not called out for lying about the event. What are they called out about? There's no way you could have seen what you claim to have seen because you were with us. Now, how do you make witnesses into Eidim Zomin? Because witnesses say the event occurred at this place, right? At this time, on this date, along with a couple of other details. Those are called chakiros, right? So again, if a witness messes up on any of the chakiros or they contradict each other about the chakiros, they're disqualified. But interestingly enough, Rabbi Yehuda posits that if they contradict each other with bedikos, then they can still be trusted. For example, we'll say, what's a good example about bedikos? We ask, let's say again, witnesses show up and they say, Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. So the court's going to ask them, by the way, what was Reuven wearing? So if it turns out that they testify that Reuven was wearing a black suit, but he was wearing a white suit. It's a little strange, but you understand, right? He was wearing a white suit, so Lamaisa, again, the testimony is not thrown out because of that. So that's what he's saying. So if they contradict each other with some element of the bedikos, they're still kosher. That is the only true monetary law. So for example, let's say again, so witnesses show up and they say Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. The Beis Din says, okay, what color was the money bag, the money purse? So one witness says it was black, one witness says it was white. Okay, so the truth is we don't really care about that. It doesn't really matter. However, aval echad omer mana shachar, ve'echad omer mana lavan in mitzdarvim. But for example, if let's say one witness said, Reuven lent Shimon brand new coins, and the other witness says, no, Reuven lent Shimon old coins, that's a detail that if they contradict each other will disqualify the testimony. I both say, by the way, what's the difference between white money bag, black money bag, and new coins and old coins? Very big distinction. Remember, the loan is the coins. When they contradict each other about the detail in the coins, that is a detail in the loan itself. The color of the money bag is just a side detail. It's an extraneous detail that is not really material to the transaction itself. So also what it makes it sound like is that halacha l'maisa, now this is only true by monetary law, but it sounds like is that by capital cases, any contradiction. For example, let's say again, the witnesses show up and they say Reuven killed Shimon, right? And one witness says Reuven was wearing white clothing. Another witness says Reuven was wearing black clothing. Sounds like based on what we just said, that would disqualify the eidos. Is that true? V'amrav chista echad omer sayif hargu ve'echad omer ba'ariran hargu ein ze nachon. Supposed to listen to this. Rav Chisda said as follows: witnesses show up. They say Reuven killed Shimon. One witness says Reuven killed Shimon with a sword. The other opinion says Reuven killed Shimon with a dagger. So what's the halacha? Ein ze nachon. So say Ein ze nachon means the witnesses don't combine. They don't combine. They're contradicting each other. Echad omer kelev shchorim, ve'echad omer kelev levanim, harei ze nachon. On the other hand, if let's say again one witness says Reuven was wearing white clothing, one witness says Reuven was wearing black clothing, that's fine. That's right. We'll say top of Lamed Aleph, 31a. To which the Gemara says, no. Gavra karam. It's a machlokes. So we'll say, so fascinatingly enough, here's what it sounds like is happening over here. Everyone agrees by dine mamanis if witnesses contradict each other with what we call a non-transactional material fact, then it doesn't matter to us. What's an example of that? Two witnesses show up, they say Reuben lent Shimon $1,000. One says Reuben was wearing black clothing, one says Shimon was wearing white clothing. That doesn't matter to the transaction. So therefore the edus will still be good. One witness says it was new coins, the other witness says it was old coins. That's material, because that's about the money itself. That will disqualify them. So what about if they contradict each other with what we call a non-material fact or a non-event material fact when it comes to capital cases? Is that going to disqualify it? That's a machlokes. So two witnesses show up and they say, we saw Reuven kill Shimon. One witness says Reuven was wearing white clothing. One witness says he was wearing black clothing. Does that disqualify the edus? That's a machlokes. Okay. Top of Lamed, we'll say 31a. Here we go. Then Adoyim say, Afilu echad omer mana shachar ve'echad omer mana lavan mitztarfin. Not true. Even if one witness says white clothing, one witness says black clothing, they still combine. Kiman Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. That's Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha. Supposed to say, so now what we're doing over here is very interesting. We're lumping a lot into the Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha basket. Remember again, what did Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha say? Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha said that halacha l'maisa, witnesses do not have to see the same event together in order to come and form a cohesive testimonial unit. Now what we're doing over here, now the Gemara is saying something fascinating. Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha also holds that even if witnesses contradict each other with a non-material event, with a non-material piece of information, that's okay also. Which one says, hold up. When does Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha say that witnesses can combine? When they're not contradicting each other. What Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha said is that witnesses need not witness the same event together. They don't have to witness the same event together, right? But Lamaisa, that's all he says. But when they contradict each other, right? But again, Rabbi Shmuel ben Karcha say that witnesses could combine together if they contradict each other. Ella, hu damar kiaitan. Rather, he holds like the following time. Here we go. The Sanya. Amr Shimon Elazar lo nechleku beishay beisilal shtei kitei edim sha'achas omeres masayim ve'achas omeres mana. Listen to this, Rabbi Say. You have two sets of witnesses now, right? Group one says Reuven owes Shimon $2,000. Group 2 says Reuven owes Shimon $1,000. So the Gemara says they're not contradicting each other. Why? Sheyesh bichlal masayim mana. So as I say, interestingly enough, now again, why? Because they do agree on something. What do they agree on? $1,000. Mana. Okay. The second mana is in dispute, but at least you have two sets of witnesses that both agree that Reuven owes Shimon at least $1,000. Aman nechlakus. What's the machlokes? Al kat achos. What happens in one testimonial group? What happens if you have two witnesses? One witness says Reuven owes Shimon $1,000, and one witness says Reuven owes Shimon $2,000. What do you do with those two witnesses? Beis Shammai omrim nechlaka idusan. Beis Shammai says you got to throw it out. So it's called an edos mochashes. They're inherently contradictory, and therefore halacha l'maisa it doesn't work. Well, Beis Hillel says no. Yesh bichlal masayim mana. It's not true. Actually, it does work. Because fascinatingly enough, they are in agreement on one core fact, which is that what? Reuven owes Shimon $1,000. Okay, and therefore, if I was, isn't that fascinating? So according to Beis Hillel, they actually form a cohesive testimonial unit about the first 1,000. The other 1,000, not, but the first 1,000, yes. Now watch this. Listen to this. What happens if, right, you have two witnesses, and they come along and they say the following. One witness says, Reuven owes Shimon a barrel of wine. And the other one says, Reuven owes Shimon a barrel of oil. So what do you do with this? Havo, though this happened. And the case came before Rabbi Ami. Chayve, Rabbi Ami, the shalom ele chavisa de chamra, migo chavisa de mishchan. Abba said, the Gemara is operating over here that a barrel of oil is more expensive, is more valuable than a barrel of wine. See, interestingly enough, this case happened. It came before Rabbi Ami. And what did Rabbi Ami say? Rabbi Ami, obligated Reuven to pay Shimon the value of a barrel of wine. Because we'll say there's the same thing as 1,000, 2,000. Both are agreeing that Reuven owes Shimon at least the value of a barrel of wine. Just one is saying that's the total obligation. The other is saying he also owes him plus the value of oil. To which the Gemara says, what does that mean? Who's this opinion? Said, like Rabbi Shimon Elazar. Imra Dam Rabbi Shimon Elazar, Heicha Diyesh Bichla Masayim Moneh. Ki Agavna Mi Amar. So both say that's very strange. This is not comparable to the case of 1,000 versus 2,000. In 1,000, 2,000, what are they referring to? Same commodity, money. In this case, it's two different commodities, right? One witness is saying a barrel of oil, one witness is saying a barrel of wine. How does it make sense that Rabbi Ami obligated Ruvain to pay Shimon the value of a barrel of wine? It doesn't make any sense. To which the Gemara says, Lo tzricha l'dami. No. We'll say the case actually wasn't about a barrel of wine, a barrel of oil. It was about value. That one witness said Reuben owed Shimon the value of a barrel of oil. One witness said he owed him the value of a barrel of wine, and Rabbi Ami obligated Reuben to pay Shimon the value of a barrel of oil because that was the amount that they both agreed on, like the 1,000 and the 2,000. Fascinating. So you must listen to this. Echad Omer, I will say that back to Eidos just a moment. Echad Omer b'diyuta ha'elyona, echad Omer b'diyuta ha'tachtona. So listen to this. Witnesses come forward. And they say that Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. What do they argue about? They're about the following detail. One says that the loan took place on the upper story of the house, and one says the loan took place on the lower story of the house. So what's the halacha? So it says, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Maise balafanai Rabbi v'tzirei feidusan. So this happened. Right? Rabbi Chanina said this happened before Rabbi, and Rabbi went ahead and combined their eidos. Because halacha l'maisa again, they were contradicting each other about a non-material fact. I'll just point out over here, the halacha is as follows. The way we paskin, Rambam paskin is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Now, he makes a difference between what we'll call monetary law and capital law. In capital law, right, in capital cases, the witnesses must witness the murder, must witness the capital event together. Right? So in any capital case, right, capital case doesn't have to be a case of murder. It's any capital case is any case where a person, the eidos is going to result in a potential death penalty. So in those cases, witnesses have to see the event together. But by Dine Mamanas, the Rambam Paskins, Afa pi shelo ra elu es elu edusan mitztarefes. Incredible Abosai. So Rambam Passes like Rabbi Shimon Karcha that even if witnesses do not see the event together, they can still combine to form a testimonial unit. Aval b'dini mamanas aval b'shlo ro elu es elu edusan mitztarefes. Keitzad amra echa b'fanei hilval b'yom ploni o b'fanei hodel o v'amra sheni v'chein ani mei shalvalim b'fanei hodel b'yom acher hare elu mitztarefes. So there's two things happening over here. Number one, like Rabbi Shimon Karcha, that Allah Chalamayis again, witnesses can go ahead and witness the event separately. But halacha l'maisa again, and still combine. The truth is, they could even give their eidos one after the other in Beis Din, and also still combine. And not only that, they could even contradict each other on non-transactionally material facts, and have their testimony still accepted. Okay, a lot more meat to put on those bones, but that's the construct. Good, let's go back there. So remember again, the Mishnah said that Allah after the Beis Din delivers its decision, so that the judges come out, even if there was dissenting opinions, the judges should not say to the litigants, I was really on your side, but what could I do? The majority was against you. So how do we know about say that after the adjudication of the case, so the judges shouldn't come out and say to the litigants, I was really on your side, but what could I do? The majority was against you, so the majority wins. Torah says, do not be a gossip monger. Lashon hara, you're going to cause a lot of Lashon hara in Klal Yisrael. V'omer, holech Rachel megala sod. Person who walks like a Rachel, both said Rachel is like a Lashon of Rocha, like a spice salesman. Right? The spice salesman, he talks with everyone, he gossips with everyone, he schmoozes with everyone. So don't be like that. Don't be the kind of person who is Rachel and megala sod, a revealer of secrets. So it was an incredible story. Hahu talmida de nafik alekala de gali milsa. The Itmar Bei Midrasha, Basar Estrin V'Tartin Shnin. So also there was a particular Talmud in the Beis Medrash who the rumor went out about him that he was revealing secrets that happened 22 years ago. Meaning what happened? So stuff happens in the Beis Medrash, right? They adjudicated certain cases, they reviewed certain things, and therefore word got out that this guy was spilling certain secrets. So what happened? Afki Rabbi Ami Ben Midrasha. Rabbi Ami threw him out of the base medrash. Amar Din Gali Razia. This is a revealer of secrets. So I'll say, brother, you also see something tremendously sewed about how important it is to be able to keep confidence about certain things. Obviously, certain things can be shared, but other things a person really has to be a vault. And what it means to be a vault is really to keep things to yourself. We all know this. Once you share information with someone, even if it's in confidence, you have absolutely no expectation that it's going to remain in confidence. And once a person lacks that credibility to maintain a confidence like that, unfortunately, their entire credibility is truly undermined. Incredible Mishnah. I will say so much more to say about that Gemara, but absolutely unequivocally no time. Mishnah. Calls mancha maybe raya. So stress adin. So we'll say, so now we're focusing a little bit more on the litigant, right? So Ruvain's in court, right? Ruvain's in Beis Din. And Ruvain was, right, Shimon came to Beis Din because he said Ruvain owed him $10,000. And Ruvain was protesting, he does not owe him anything. So what's the halacha? So any time that Ruvain could bring proof, right? Anytime that Ruvain could bring proof, right? Halacha l'maisa, again, Ruvain is allowed to furnish proof to prove that he doesn't owe anything, right? So stress adin. Rashi says over here, kol zman shemevi raya. Rashi says, right? Haba lebeis din v'lo haya shtar zechusa v'yadav v'yatza mi beis din chayiv u'la'achar zman matza shtar zechusa v'heviu. So stress adin. Beis social nodino shapasko mechavin esheknedus. We'll say, so essentially it's fascinating. The Mishnah seems to be indicating to us that pretty much you could go back and prove your case anytime you want. So let's say again, Shimon called Ruvain to Beis Din. Ruvain, you owe me $10,000. Ruvain could not prove that he didn't, or Shimon proved that he did. Ruvain didn't have any counter proof. So Beis Din paskin, Ruvain owes Shimon $10,000. Ruvain then finds some proof later on. Ruvain could go back to Beis Din, and Beis Din opens up the case. There's no statute of limitations. He goes back and opens up the case, and ultimately, again, if he can prove that he doesn't owe anything, so Beis Din will have to reverse the ruling. Amar Gemara says, Amar lo kol rayos sheish lecha have mikanat shloshim yom. So we'll say, what happens if Beis Din says, Ruvain, here's the deal. This din Torah is going to last 30 days. So whatever proof you have 30 days to furnish it. After 30 days, we're done. So if he finds with him 30 days, good. But after 30 days, we're done. So the Tanna Kama holds that Beis Din has the ability to really go ahead and create a window. This court case is going to take 30 days. Whatever proof you have, 30 days you have to furnish it. If you can't furnish it within 30 days, we're done. So the says, so that's the Tanakama. What's the first white line? What's the Achar Shloshim Yom? Rabbi Shmuel says, absolutely not. Absolutely not. How is that fair to Ruvain? Sometimes Ruvain only gets the proof 35 days, 45 days, 102 days. It's not his fault. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Shmuel holds that whenever Ruvain finds proof, he's able to come back to Beis Din and reopen the case. We'll say fundamental machlokes. First white line. So Gemara says, "Va'amar lo have." So what happened? So good. Va'amar lo have edim. Va'amar ainli edim. So we'll say, listen to this. Let's say Beis Din says to Ruvain, okay, support your claim, bring witnesses. Ruvain says, I don't have any witnesses. Amar have raya, or they say Beis Din says to Ruvain, bring proof to support your position. Va'amar ainli raya. He says, I don't have any proof. So let's listen to this. And then later on, Ruvain finds witnesses, or Ruvain finds proof that Tanakama paskins inadmissible. Why is it inadmissible? Because Ruvain said, I don't have witnesses. And Ruvain said, I don't have proof. So we are concerned that what? If suddenly he shows up and says, oh, I found witnesses, I found proof, that doesn't schmeck right? It doesn't smell right. It doesn't look like it is appropriate. I'm sure Rabbi Shmuel has to listen to this. Not at all. Maya says that shelo hayodesh yesh la'idim umatza idim lo hayodesh yesh la'raya umatza raya. Listen, what do you want from the guy? He didn't know. He thought he had no witnesses. He thought he had no proof. It doesn't have to be that there's anything illegal happening over here. Sometimes a person just doesn't know what the tools they have at their disposal, and therefore, again, it is admissible. We'll say pretty incredible. So fundamental machlokes, you see this ongoing machlokes. Tanakama holds that Beis Din has a right to create a window. Furnish any proof you have within the window. If you can't meet the window, then you're out. Rabbi says, not true. Anytime you find proof, anytime you find witnesses, you can bring it back to Beis Din, and Beis Din will have to rehear or rehear your case. Next, Beis Din says to Ruvain, bring your witnesses. Ruvain says, I have none. Bring your proof. I have none. Tanakama says, okay, once you have none, you can't introduce anything after. Shmuel says, what are you talking about? Of course you can. Of course you can. At the end of the day, maybe he just didn't know that he had witnesses. He didn't know that he had proof. Excellent. Let's go weiter. Rosh Mischayiv Bidin va'amar karvu leploni. Ploni leploni, right? So what happens? So the Gemara says as follows. Rosh Mischayiv Bidin va'amar kirvu ploni uploni v'yuduni o shahotzi rai mitachas pundaso. So we'll say harizeh eno klom. So this last case is very interesting as well. In this last case, I will say the Gemara says as follows. So Reuven sees that he's losing the case. Right? He sees that he's losing the case. So what does he do? He says, "Oh, you know what? I have more witnesses. Go ahead and bring these additional witnesses here." Or he pulls out a star from underneath his cloak. Right? The surprise, right? The surprise, what's the word? Evidence. Right? Surprise evidence. I like to introduce new evidence into the proceedings. Right? So let's say, by the way, first of all, it's interesting, right? Because we'll come back to it. So right, he introduces new evidence. So what's the halacha? Harizeh eno klum. No shtick. If you had witnesses to introduce, you introduced them earlier on. You had evidence to introduce, you introduced that. You're waiting now to introduce this until you see that you're losing the case. So again, the Mishnah says, sounds too fishy to us, and therefore, again, not introducible. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba Barafuna, Halakha B'Shem Gamliel. The halakha of B'Shem Gamliel. This is very important. Now remember, what does B'Shem Gamliel say? B'Shem Gamliel says, you could always furnish new proof to the Beis Din. Whether you're outside of the window that Beis Din imposed, or whether you answered in the negative, when Beis Din asked you, do you have witnesses? Do you have evidence? Even if you said no, Shmuel says, halacha l'maisa, if you have proof, you have witnesses, you can always introduce it. So what says interesting. So Rabbi Barafuna says two statements. In statement number 1, he says, the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. In statement number 2, he says, the halacha follows the chachamim. So the Gemara says, the halacha does not follow the chachamim. They both say that's effectively saying the same thing. So pshita, keva the amar halacha b'shem Gamliel, memeli yedana de'in halacha ki chachamim. They both say those statements are understood. Once you say that the halacha follows b'shem Gamliel, then it's understood that the halacha does not follow the chachamim. To which the Gemara says, what's going on over here? Ma'adhim, what would you have thought? Hanini l'chatchila. I would have thought that this is true l'chatchila. In other words, the l'chatchila we follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, right? Aval b'di eved shapir dami. But maybe the eved we paskin like the Rabbanon. Then in other words, that if a Beis Din paskin like the Rabbanon, and let's say after the window, didn't listen to Reuven, right? Even though he had new proof, right? Or again, after saying he doesn't have witnesses, doesn't have proof, they didn't admit anything new. Kamashvan di avid majinale. To which the Gemara says, no. It means that we actually pass Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. That if halacha l'maisa again, Reuven comes after the window, Reuven comes with new proof, and Beis Din doesn't listen to him, and therefore Beis Din sides with Shimon, we will force Beis Din to overturn its ruling and to go ahead and return whatever it was to Reuven. Incredible. So Amar lahavei idim, Amar Shimon Gamliel, so Amar Rabbi Barafuna, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha k'divrei chachamim. The halacha follows the chachamim. And I both say, remember again, this is the second case, right? In the second case, what's happening over here? Beis Din says to Reuven, do you have witnesses? Reuven says, no. Beis Din says, Reuven, do you have evidence? And Reuven says, no. Then afterwards, Reuven brings evidence, or Reuven brings witnesses. Saloch Lamais again, Shimon Gamliel says, it's okay. The Chum say it's not okay. It's not okay. Once you answer the negative, it's not okay. So now, Rabbi Barafuna says, the halacha follows the Chachamim. Va'amar Rabba Barafuna, Amar Rabbi Yonasa, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ein halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. The halacha does follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So we'll say once again, Pshita. Keivan damar halacha divrei chachamim, v'meili yadana dein halacha Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So we'll say once again, those I don't need it. That's redundant. Once you tell me that halacha follows Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, then I know the halacha does not follow the chachamim. Sorry, just the opposite. Once you tell me the halacha follows the chachamim, I know the halacha does not follow B'Shem Gamliel. To which the Gemara says, "Hakam Ashlan debahayi halacha B'Shem Gamliel habekulu halacha B'Shem Gamliel." Suppose he comes to teach you the following halacha that normally in this halacha we don't follow B'Shem Gamliel, but normally we do follow B'Shem Gamliel. Do Amar Rabba Bar Bachan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kamakom Sheshana Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'Mishnaseinu halacha kimoso. In general, whenever you see, this is actually one of those principles that's good to know. Whenever you see Rabbi Shimon Gamliel mentioned in the Mishnah, the halacha always follows him, except for 3 cases: chutz, me'arev, v'tzidon, v'raya achrona. So remember again. So I'll say arev and tzidon are different cases. What's raya achrona? That's our case. Raya achrona is the case where Beis Din says to Reuven, Do you have any witnesses? Reuven says no. Do you have any evidence? Reuven says no. And then Reuven comes back later on, Raya Achrona, he comes back and he says, I do have witnesses. I do have evidence. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says it's admissible. The Chachamim say inadmissible. And this is one of the cases where we paskin against Rabbi Shmuel Silber. We paskin like the Chachamim, and therefore it is inadmissible. So I will say, so it's interesting, by the way, I'll point out that in case number 1 of the Mishnah, we're paskin Rabbi Shmuel Silber. Namely, again, if Beis Din says, Reuven, you have 30 days to furnish your witnesses and evidence, and Reuven comes on day 35, the Tanakama says, sorry, you missed your window. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, no, it's admissible. That case, we paskin Rabbi Shmuel Silber. Case number 2, Beis Din says, Rabbi Shmuel Silber, do you have any witnesses? Do you have any evidence? And Reuven says, no. So again, then later on he introduces new evidence, new testimony. Tanakama says, inadmissible. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says, admissible. We paskin like the Chachamim, it's inadmissible, not like Rabbi Shmuel Silber. Beautiful. We'll say some stories. Hahu Yanukah. We'll say 6 lines after the bottom. The Tavo Ladina. There was once a child who was brought to Beis Din. We'll say now what this means is this wasn't a state case, right? This wasn't a state case. So the child was brought to Beis Din. Right? Tavo Kamei Rav Nachman. Amar le Islacha Sahadi. So Rav Nachman says to the kid, do you have any witnesses like about the claim? So Amar le Lo. So ultimately the kid said no. Islacha Raya. Do you have any proof? Amar le Lo. He said no. So what happened? Chayve Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman made the child, the estate, liable. So Havabachi va'azil. The child started crying. Right? He was found guilty not guilty, found liable in a Beis Din. So what happens? The Gemara says, Shamua hanach inshi amrulei anan yedana b'mili da'avuch. So what happened? People heard about the kid crying. They heard about the case. And they said, oh, no, we know about your father's affairs. I mean, right, your father's monetary affairs. Right. And Lamaisa, we know that your father's actually not liable to anything. So I'll say, so now what happened? So here was a perfect case of what happened. The Beis Din, Rav Nachman said to the kid, do you have any evidence? He said no. Do you have any witnesses? He said no. So therefore he lost. Now it turns out there are witnesses. There is evidence. So we'll say, listen to this. Rav Nachman, in this case, we'll say everyone agrees. Even the Rabbanan would agree that the new evidence is admissible. Why? Because everyone knows that a child is not necessarily versed in the affairs of the estate of his father. And therefore, again, this type of new evidence would be admissible. Incredible. So listen to this. There was a woman, and she produced a shtar in Beis Din. Now, we'll say that in the shtar it said that Reuven lent Shimon money. Now, she was a third party with whom the shtar was deposited. She comes to Beis Din and she says, I know that the debt is paid. Shimon paid back the debt. So the Gemara says, Hemli Rav Nachman believed her. He accepted her word. So why is that? The Gemara says, Rav Nachman kiman kirebi. Like Rebbe. Well, so Rebbe holds that literally again, which means that when you hold the shtar, holding the shtar itself gives you the right to collection. So therefore, technically speaking, we'll call her Rachel. When Rachel shows up in Beis Din and she's holding the shtar, what could she have done with it? She could have collected with it. So therefore, again, the fact that she says, I'm telling you that Shimon paid back this debt, it's like amigo. Since she could have collected with it, she's believed to say that the debt is repaid. Amarle shani hacha dibaya kalsi. She could have also burned it. She could also destroyed it. In other words, of course she's going to be believed over here. No one knew about the shtar except her, right? In other words, Beis Din didn't know about the shtar. She could have also destroyed it, and no one would have ever known the difference. So because she could have destroyed it, she's believed when she comes forth and gives testimony about it. Ikeda Amri, lo hemdi Rav Nachman. Others say, no. The case is actually where the woman comes to Beis Din. She's holding a shtar that says Reuben lent Shimon $1,000, and she claimed that Allah Lamaisa Shimon paid back the money. So according to this version, Rav Nachman didn't believe her. Amrli Rav Nachman, I baha ibay Amit Beis. But why wouldn't you believe her? After all, she could go ahead. She could have burned it. So which the Gemara says, no. Because this was actually ultimately, again, Rashi points out this was a shtar with a handpick. This was a shtar with certification. Once a shtar has been certified in Beis Din, that means people know about it. Because people know about it, you can't make the claim that halacha l'maisa, she could have gone ahead and destroyed it. Okay, so fine. So we'll say, by the way, the way we pass in that case is, according to the first version, that if Rachel shows up with this document, and no one really knew about it except Rachel, and now it says that Reuben lent Shimon $1,000, and Rachel's claiming that Shimon paid back the debt, she is believed. She is believed to make that claim. Ultimately, again, really because of the migo, she couldn't destroy it. She could not brought it forward at all. So therefore, she's believed the zayis repaid. Incredible. So Rava brings questions around Nachman. Simphon sheishalav edim is kain bechosamav. I will say simphon. Simphon is a receipt. Is a receipt, right? It's a shtar that says a debt was paid. So if there's edim on the simphon, then ultimately is kain bechosamav. Then we certify the signatures. We're good to go. What happens if there were no witnesses, but a third party produces that document? Or it's written in the document itself after the document. Kasher, ultimately again it's kasher. So we'll say, what do you see from here? When a third party produces information that no one else knew about, the third party is believed to qualify the information. It's a simple migo. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Tiyufta Rav Nachman, Tiyufta. Okay, that refutes the second version of Rav Nachman that we just had before. Kias Rav Dimi Am Rabbi Yochanan Li'olam Maybe Raya V'Soser. Ultimately, again, you could always bring a raya and go ahead. So let's read the words. But the words, I'm just giving you a heads up, the words themselves are not going to make sense. We're going to have to reinterpret them. So this is what it means. Li'olam maybe raya. So we'll say back to our previous discussion. What was our second discussion in the Mishnah? The second discussion in the Mishnah was, at what point, in other words, what are the rights of a litigant to introduce new evidence? That's really what we're asking over here. So Rabbi Yochanan says like this: Li'olam maybe raya v'soser. A litigant could always bring new information, new proof, and literally soser and contradict until ultimately, again, his claims are closed off. Now look at Rashi. Rashi says, it's almost right across from Rashi. Actually, he's right across from Rashi. Mashma sha'amar bebezdin ein li lo edim v'lo raya v'chazer v'amar kirvu ploni u'ploni shay mizuman sham u'metchila soser ta'anosav lomar ein li. So we'll say, so let's translate it. A person can always bring a proof and contradict what he said until his claims are closed off. Okay, so the Gemara says, and he could say, let so and so come and testify on my behalf. The Gemara says, statement doesn't make any sense. I'll go for kasha. Amrit yistatim tanosav. So on one hand, we said his claim is closed. What does it mean his claim is closed? So we'll say. So again, if the Beit says, Reuven, you have any proof? Reuven says no. Reuven, you have any witnesses? Yes. Reuven says no. So what does that sound like? That sounds like the Rabbanan. That once you say no, we're done. We're done. You can't introduce anything new. And then it says, V'hadra Amar, Kirvu ish ploni uploni be'edin, but then it sounds like even after you said no, what can you do? You could say, I want to introduce new testimony. That's like Rabbi Shmuel Silber. So which one is it? Do we say that after you say no, we're done? No more introduction of any new evidence? Or no, you could always introduce new evidence. What's going on over here? Maybe you could say the whole thing is Rabbi Shmuel Silber, and really we're just interpreting what he originally said. What does it mean ultimately again until he closes off? Right? Yistatim tanosav means closing off his claims. Kirvu ploni uploni v'heiduni. That what it means to close off your claims is until you introduce, ultimately, again, the final testimony. So the Gemara says, V'hamara barachan Rabbi Yochanan kol makom sheshar b'shegam liel b'mishnaseinu halacha kimoso chutz me'arev v'tzilon v'rayach rona. But I want to say, but we just said before, right? We just said at Amud Aleph that you're right. Generally, the halacha follows Rav Shimon Gamliel, except when in 3 cases. Rabbi saying, now right now the first 2 aren't that, they're important but not important for us now. Rabbi saying things that are life, there are things in life that are important, but they're not necessarily important now. So again, everything in Gemara is important, but for now, Arvin Sidon are not. Raya, could have already just explained it in the amount of time that I give that explanation. Good, right? But right now we're focusing on Raya Achrona, right? What's Raya Achrona? Raya Achrona is exactly our case that we just mentioned here before. Raya Achrona is that again, Beis said, Reuven, you have any witnesses? No. You have any evidence? No. And then he wants to introduce something new. Even though Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says it's fine, we do not paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in that case. What's going on over here? Eli Kesar Shmuel Bar Yehuda Rabbi Yochanan. Here we go. Li'ola maybe raya v'soser ad sheyistom ta'anosav. In reality, a litigant always has a right to introduce new testimony until he closes off his claims. V'yomru lo have edim va'omer ein li edin, have raya, va'omer ein li raya. So we'll say, this is interesting. So the way the Gemara is reading like this, a litigant can introduce any evidence he wants. Now, as we'll say, it appears at the end, like after the evidence has been introduced, what does Beis Din do? Beis Din turns to Reuven and Shimon and says, Reuven, do you have any more witnesses? Right? Do you have any more testimony? At that point, if Reuven says no, gamarnu, we're done. Which Rabbi said, you understand, like procedurally, it has to work that way, right? Because again, if he keeps saying yes, or you allow, in other words, there has to be a certain point in time where the din Torah ends. The din Torah ends. So the Gemara says, Aval. So and that's in line what we said before. That again, by Raya Achrona, we do not pass like B'Shem Gamliel, we pass like the Chachamim. Beautiful. The world is coming together. Everything is coming together. Right? So therefore, again, I will say, so I just want to point out, so one more piece. About Bo Edim Dinas Hayam, Oshai said, Disakya Shal Aviv Mufkedas Biad Achar, Harezim Mebi Raya V'Soser. But, if witnesses came from overseas, or someone discovered a trove of documents that belonged to Reuven's father, right, that no one ever knew about, those are admissible. So what you see is something amazing. If after the Beis Din says to Reuven, do you have any more witnesses? Do you have any more evidence? And Reuven says no, the case is closed. And Reuven can't introduce anything new. But if there is new evidence that comes to light, that is clear, no one knew about, witnesses come from overseas, literally, discover a new trove of documents, that's admissible. Everyone agrees that's admissible because there was no way that anyone could have known about that. That becomes admissible into court. Incredible. We'll say this is a fascinating case. It happens all the time. Reuven and Shimon have a legal dispute. And what happens? Reuven says, I'd like to go to the local Beis Din. And Shimon says, no, I want to go to a greater Beis Din. Makom Avad means like an assembly place, right? I want to go to a better Beis Din, a different Beis Din. So what's the halacha? So again, Shimon has the ability to say to Reuven, no, we're going to the greater Beis Din, Makom Avad, right place of gathering, going to the Makom Avad. So Amr Lefan of Rabbi Elazar, Amr Lefan of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, Rabbi, Mishanosha Bechaver Mana, Yotzi Mana Almana. So I don't understand. I was like, imagine the following case. Let's say Reuven and Shimon go ahead and have a dispute about $500. So now, right, Reuven says, let's adjudicate it here. Shimon says, no, I would like to adjudicate it in the basin of Miami Beach. Sounds great, right? I would adjudicate anything in Miami Beach right now. Right, guys? So I want to go to the basin of Miami Beach. So what happens? And welcome to Rabbi Rasmus, who's here with us. Baruch Hashem to the Shabbos, right? So let's say, so now I want to go to Miami Beach. So again, you're going to spend hundreds of dollars to get to Florida to adjudicate a case of $500. That doesn't make any sense. To which the Gemara says, "Elakofin also have done bira." Rather, I both say, if one person wants to adjudicate it locally and the other person wants to adjudicate it out of town, the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa we adjudicate it locally. Now, again, that's what the Gemara is passing over here. Sometimes the reality is a bit more complex than what's being relayed over here, but that's the halacha. That's halacha. Itmar now we have a Bryce that supports Amar Safra Shnaim Shnis Atzmu Bedin. If you have two people who got into it, two people locked in a dispute. Echad Omer Nidon Kam ve'Echad Omer Neilech L'Makom Avad. One says let's adjudicate it here. One says let's go to a greater Beis Din. Kofin, both say first white line on the bottom. Kofin also v'dan be'iro. So ultimately again we force ultimately again for the adjudication of the case here in town. V'im Hutzra Davar Lishol. He'll say, but 1 second, what if the Beis Din of Miami is much better than the Beis Din of Baltimore? So again, what happens if a question comes up that we can't answer over here? No problem. Send the question. Send it. Right? Send a letter. Right? Send an email over to the other Beis Din and they'll answer it. So now a separate halacha. When someone loses a case, a person has a right to request a written opinion from Beis Din. They have a right to request a written opinion. Explain to me why you judged against me, and Beis Din is obligated to go ahead and furnish that. And I will say that, interestingly enough, so as much as we said that in general, the halacha is that if one litigant wants a local Beis Din and one wants an out-of-town Beis Din, you have to go to the local Beis Din. There are exceptions to this rule. For example, Yibum, or better stated, Chalitza. Chalitza has to be done in the presence of a Beis Din. So let's say again, Reuven wants to go to one Beis Din, Rachel wants to go to a different Beis Din. Rachel has to go to whatever Beis Din Reuven wants. Why? Ad kama, how far? Even from Tiveria to Tzipori. Now, I will say, now just to point out, Tveria and Tzipori is actually not that far, right? In other words, if you would have told me, I don't know, from Be'er Sheva to Tzipori. But remember again, Tveria and Tzipori are both in the north of the country. The idea is over here, Tveria had a yeshiva and a real basin. Tzipori was inferior to that. But yet, ultimately, again, if the husband says, I want to go to Tzipori, we go to Tzipori. Amrav Kahana, Mikra, what's the pasuk? V'karu lo zikne iro, v'lo zikne iro. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the way that the pasuk by Yibum is phrased, it says the elders of his city, right? And not the elders of her city. So you see from here that by chalitza is a yavam-driven process, and therefore he has the right to choose the venue. Amra Meimar, Hilchasa, Kofinosa v'yilech l'mokom avad. So Meimar comes looking at Meimar, turns on his head. He said, by the way, beforehand, it sounded like if one litigant wants the local venue, another litigant wants the out-of-town Beis Din, we force everybody to go to the local Beis Din. Comes along the Meimar and says, no, the halacha is, if one of the Batei Din is clearly superior to the other, even if it's out of town, so in other words, if the local Beis Din is inferior, the out-of-town Beis Din is superior, we could force a change of venue to the out-of-town Beis Din. That's not what we just said. We just said before that halacha l'maisa. If one of the parties wants a local venue and the other party wants an out-of-town venue, we force it to a local venue. Oh, when can't you force an out-of-town change of venue? That's when the borrower wants to take the lender to an out-of-town Beis Din. That's not going to work. If the lender wants to stay in town, then ultimately, again, the borrower cannot force a change of venue. Aval malva, but if the lender wants an out-of-town venue, then the lender has a right to go ahead and force that. Why? Eved lovel li'ish malva. We see this theme over and over as the pasuk says that literally, again, a borrower, pasuk from Mishlei, a borrower is considered to be a servant to the lender. When you borrow money from someone, so again, you are a shtickle servant to that person, and therefore, if the malva wants to change a venue, you got to go ahead and honor that. So we'll say, here we go. Shalchol Mar Ukva. So we'll say they sent the following message to Mar Ukva. Lidiziv le kebar bitya. Shalom Okvan. Right? Shalom. Right? Shalom. So we'll say this is an incredible idea. So they sent the following message to Mar Okva. And we'll say, I want to point out how incredibly amazing this is. They called Mar Ukva, right? They said to the person who has the visage, the ziv, right? The Torah panim, the appearance of Bar Bitya. Who's Bar Bitya? Bar Bitya is Moshe Rabbeinu. So we'll say, I just want to point out something absolutely amazing. Right? That's this week's parasha. Besides the fact that there was no reasonable way that our shir, should have gotten to this Gemara, right? In time. I just want to point out how incredible is it on a 7.5 year cycle, that we are able to go ahead and get to this section of Bitya. Bitya was the daughter of Paro. The one, Vatishlach es Amasa, the woman who went ahead and saved Moshe Rabbeinu from the Nile. Just so you understand how absolutely overwhelmingly incredible this is, and a tremendous confluence of events. There was also a hostage deal that was signed on Erev Shabbos of Parsha Shmos. Right? So Parsha Shmos is ultimately, again, is the story of Avdos. It's the story of servitude. And nestled in that story of servitude is the story of one incredible child being saved. Now that one child was Moshe Rabbeinu. Sometimes like the Ribono Shel Olam tells us, I promise you I have a plan. Because so often we look around the world and it's hard to see that there's a plan. And it's hard to see that there's some greater machination that is at work. And it's hard to see how all the disparate pieces will somehow, someday, I know it's not going to happen today, but somehow, someday, will come together. And what the Ribono Shel Olam does is he leaves us like breadcrumbs. He kind of just puts things around. And when you take those things and you put them together, then somehow it gives you the assurance that somehow, some way, in a world that is filled sometimes with so much pain and so much difficulty, that somehow everything will come together, right? So on the Erev Shabbos, where the Torah speaks about Jews in captivity, right? So again, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to bring some of them home. And on the Erev Shabbos of Parsha Shmos, in a 7.5 year cycle, the Ribono Shel Olam talks about Bitya, the daughter of Paro, who literally, again, heroically saved Moshe Rabbeinu from the Nile. So what do I do with all of these disparate facts? I don't know what to do with it. But here's what I know. I know when I put them all together, what I know is that there is an incredible and beautiful and holy and loving Ribono Shel Olam who is choreographing everything in this world. And that somehow, some way, everything is going to be okay. It doesn't mean that there's not difficulty and that there's not pain ahead, because there is. Because even as we bring home some of our brothers and sisters, so many others still languish in captivity. And what the deal means for the military campaign and recognizing, we spoke about last night in Chasidus, that there really is no one on the other end of the table to truly negotiate with. We don't know what's going to be. But what I do know is that Ribono Shel Olam is giving me breadcrumb after breadcrumb, kiss after kiss, hug after hug, and it reminds me that He is in control, that He is the awesome, holy, and spiritual choreographer, and that somehow, some way, halavai, speedily in our days, all the pieces will drop perfectly into place. So we'll say, stop over for today. Okay, so we didn't finish the paragraph. Sorry. Sorry for today, 6:46. But again, I just want to point out that please just look where we started, and please just look where we finished. We'll say, Shkach, we'll finish the paragraph tomorrow. Mirz Hashem, Shkach, for a good Erev Shabbos. All right, Chavrazim, have a great day, everyone. A good Erev Shabbos. Sunday morning is here. I'm going to put it out there, and also Monday morning is here. They're both going to be here.
Cases. What's happening with cases?
I don't know why you want. I will let you know.